Hello, everyone. Welcome to your latest episode of Catalog and Cocktails. It's Wednesday once again, and it's time for an honest, no BS, non-salesy conversation about enterprise data management with a tasty beverage in hand and an awesome guest in this case too, which we'll introduce in just a moment. So I'm Tim Gasper. I am our product manager, director of product management over at data.world, and joined by Juan Sequeda.
Good afternoon. I'm Juan Sequeda. I'm a principal scientist here at data.world, and it seems like you're having a tough Wednesday. You need to have a break and a drink right now, Tim. You can't even say your job title. Come on.
I was thinking data manager, data product manager. I know I have my beverage here, so you know.
Well, we're really excited to be joined here today by Jeremy. Jeremy Baksht is he is an executive in the financial area. He's the global head of alternative data at Ascential, and just been a leader in data analytics, covering the entire digital economy. We are super excited to have this conversation today about data marketplace. Jeremy, thanks for joining us.
Oh, so delighted to be here. And just so everybody on the call knows, I'm an advisor to data.world. I won't plug anything today, but I'm delighted to be involved with data.world. I think what they're doing is super cool. And then I've spent a lot of time in this area, so excited to, shoot through questions and, have some fun with this.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So just as a reminder, any questions, feel free to go add them here to the chat, and also join our community Slack. Go to slack.data.world. We're really trying to kickstart that community again and have a lot of the discussions. So the discussions that we have here, we can continue them on Slack. And we're on podcasts. So you can always find all our episodes on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, even on YouTube. If you want to see our faces here, you can find them on YouTube.
So you can find us in all the good places. And before we dive into a little bit more about data marketplaces, which is going to be kind of our topic today, what are y'all drinking? Juan, what are you drinking?
I am drinking a new one, a caipirinha. So my very good friend Taizi, she gave me a bottle of cachaça, and I made myself a nice caipirinha, which is super simple. Just some limes, add some sugar, muddle it, ice, caipirinha, and here you go. Cheers. How about you guys?
I'm drinking a Jungle Bird, which is sort of a tiki-ish drink. And Jeremy, you got a drink too, or are you skipping today?
So I'm still in the office, so I grabbed a coffee cup and put water in it. So I'm probably the least interesting person here today.
That's all right. The cup has a nice design on it, so that's awesome.
It does. Look at that. It's beautiful.
For those just listening, you will not be able to see the cup, so you need to join us live.
So yeah, just as a reminder, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Central, we're always here. Everybody's welcome to join our live chat. This is our live podcast recording, and then at 30 minutes in, we'll stop recording and we'll start our conversations and more open up the floor to everyone. So just as a quick reminder, over the last couple of weeks, we've had these great conversations about data culture. Last episode, we had this conversation about the do's and the don'ts, and we had previously a great chat with the folks at the Associated Press. Now we wanted to kind of switch gears a little bit, but it's still about culture within your company. Let's talk about this notion of a data marketplace. And it is something that we're hearing more and more of. We need to do analytics with our own internal data, but there's abundant amount of external data, let it be open data or third-party vendor data. And how do I even keep started? So I think Jeremy is a great person to have this conversation here. So here we go, let's start.
Awesome. Well, hey, look, thanks so much for having me. And just to provide a little bit of background, I've spent the last 20 years in various seats on Wall Street and tech. And for me, really, principally, I always look at, finding and sourcing data to solve problems. So as I think about my life as an investment banker, looking at industrial technologies, later doing a few different data startups, probably the most relevant experience that I'll draw from today, notwithstanding what I do now, is I did spend almost 3 years at Bloomberg focused on what we called our alternative data platform. So if you think about the foundations, at least for Wall Street, not every industry, but you need reference data, you need all kinds of foundational data. And my job was to take all the data feeds that we had that were what we call alternative, i.e. not exactly finance oriented, and put them into one place. Actually our data catalog looked to some extent like what data.world does, just not as good. But the whole idea was to have some metadata and some descriptions and an offering in one place such that people can, think about, do they need that? Do they want that? And then in our case, at least at Bloomberg, it was, a little bit of a click and buy with some handholding. So I guess when I think about marketplaces, I come back to, what is the value of data and what are you looking to solve for? So let's say, for example, and some of the use cases I look at every day are, a hedge fund might want to buy or invest in a company. So from first principles, they have to think about, what is the data I need on that company that's readily available? And what are some of the ways I can find some additional insights from a legally compliant perspective to actually know a little bit more than everybody else, so I can make better decisions about investing or divesting in these companies. So to give you an example, I mean, I work with satellite providers, credit card data, you name it, email receipts. So if my question were, for example, all right, I like Tesla, I think Elon Musk is a genius. How many cars are actually rolled off the lot every day? How many cars are sold every day? So I might think about, all right, so is there a way I can get satellite data representing an image of the manufacturing plant and try to look for, how many cars rolled off the lot today? How many actually were manufactured? And then I wanted to backfill that with, okay, if I had all the DMV data, how many actual, DMV licenses are issued, registrations are issued for Teslas? So I can sort of think about, okay, how many are coming off the lot? How many are getting actually licensed and registered to somebody? Instead of waiting around 3 months for the company to tell me how many they sold, what if bottoms up, I knew what every plant was manufacturing, and every major DMV in some of the big cities like LA are printing every day? Then I have a pretty good indicator, and I can build a pretty good probabilistic model of, are they going to be above or below what they've told Wall Street? Are they above or below what Wall Street, interpreted Tesla to be? So from first principles, let's say I'm a data scientist or I'm the head of a sourcing team at a hedge fund, I need to go to a place like a data catalog or otherwise figure out what's publicly discoverable, what's privately discoverable, and whether it's click and buy or hand holding, figure out how to get it into one place. And then, for the love of God, I might spend how much time actually putting it into a useful format for my team to test and play with. But I guess every various seed has a various sort of look at this. But my supposition is, over the years, whether it's a catalog like data.world or all of the major world's platforms, Amazon, Snowflake, Bloomberg, whatever, all trying to fit that mosaic together, you need to figure out how to get something in the right person's hands, and the person that has the budget needs to figure out what they can afford. And all this wraps back to what I said originally, which is, what is the problem I'm solving anyway? So it's a lot to unpack, and I'm looking forward to unpacking it, but that's kind of a hand wavy first few minutes of what I was kind of seeing at Bloomberg. And now I'm at a consumer analytics company, Ascential. So I'm the head of a financial services division that takes all the data across all of our owned companies and tries to get them into the hands of hedge funds, banks, private equity, so they can make decisions. So a real life project might be something like, Blackstone wants to buy the next hot, gluten-free bread company. Okay, well, where do I start? Who are the brands? We have data, Amazon data, scrape data, survey data from different various pieces of our businesses. We could do a data dump on what are the breakout brands this week that cover that, unit on Amazon. So we might be able to actually help them solve that question. What's trending? What are the big ones? And then they would backfill it with, okay, how much money have each one of these raised? Are they owned by a big conglomerate? Or is this like a potentially backable company, Series C, Series D, growth equity, whatever? So these are the kinds of pieces of all the puzzle that you need to put together.
Yeah, it seems like there's a ton of different data that can be brought to bear on a lot of different questions. And more and more folks are starting to look outward from their own sort of internal data that they have to where they can leverage externally available data, whether it's for purchase or it's open or, through partners and things like that. And you obviously gave some examples around sort of the financial industry and things like that, but it seems like every industry has their sort of use cases of man, if I could have, weather data or a data on individuals or households or data on, et cetera, that could have a huge impact. And what's your assessment of, how much, organizations should care about external data? What is the impact that's having? And is that sort of changing over time?
Look, I mean, I think it's a fabulous question. And now that we have all the tooling and the speed of compute and hopefully the right tools to actually align data sets together. I think it's seminal. I think it's super important, and it works in any scenario. I mean, Juan, we had a kind of a pre-call and we were just tossing out ideas. I mean, on my walk to work, I saw a Sweetgreen. What if you're the owner of Sweetgreen that's venture backed and you want to figure out what are the zip codes that need more Sweetgreens, right? So you're going to need urban mobility information. You might want credit card receipt information. You need to understand the dynamics of what is the zip code, how many people actually like salad, how many are affluent enough to afford the expensive salad, what's the competitive landscape, how many other salad places already exist, and can they be displaced, and are rents going up or down? And now that we've got this COVID thing, all of your models and tests might not exactly work anyway. The predictive power of what is the new normal is a little bit confusing. So I do think, coming back to first principles, it's so important for any corporate intelligence or business planning, whether it's where do I plop the next Sweetgreen, or anything in industry. Should I create a new popcorn brand? Is popcorn saturated or not? I need to know the price points of popcorn. Is it popular? Is it on Amazon? Is it boutique? Is it B2C? Is it B2B? There's just so many questions around, is there a problem here that I need to solve or not? And I don't know that we need more popcorn. I'm not a popcorn entrepreneur, but there's a lot of different data sets that might help inform is there a real growth market here or not kind of question.
So how would you know what to start? Because everything you're saying, I mean, this all makes sense. We got all these questions, but I'm like so overwhelmed now. I don't want to boil the ocean, right?
Yeah.
When would an organization know that they should start looking into external data? Like, what are the flag, like the positive flags saying, wait, if you're going through this or that, like you should really start doing this? Or is there never a good time, or it's always a good time?
Yeah, I think it depends a bit on the role too. So I know I've been jumping around a little bit, but if I'm the head of business development for a company, I'm thinking about what companies I might want to acquire. Or if I'm the head of a product of a company, I might be thinking about what feature sets am I missing that I can't build myself. So I might want a list of acquisition targets. Maybe that's my old M&A brain working, but I'd at least want to know what companies solve certain problems that I might want to try to acquire. So I think it really depends on the seat. If I'm a data scientist, back to, I guess, Tim, your point on the weather, let's say I'm a manufacturer of coats. Maybe I'm Burlington Coat Factory, and we know New England's probably going to have really bad weather. How is climate change going to impact that, right? I mean, are we looking at a hotter planet? Like, am I going to sell as many jackets next year? It's hard to say from a micro and macro perspective, but if I need to figure out how are the weather patterns going to affect me, I might have to think about, well, what's available. IBM bought the Weather Channel. IBM now has APIs of this data. How expensive is it? Can I negotiate with them? How much can I get for free? And look, frankly, how relevant is it? Do people buy coats anyway, or do they wait till it's really cold? And then I've got the joint confusion now of, okay, does COVID keep people home? Do they even need jackets? I might not need to upgrade my jacket collection this year because I'm not doing anything. I'm not going skiing.
Who's buying suits right now, right? Who's buying suits? Nobody's going off to an office and traveling to business, right?
Oh, I mean, you're just hitting at the heart of what I see every day and stare at. But one of our best divisions, WGSN, does style market design for, pretty much any cutting edge product. And I can tell you, as I stare at Brooks Brothers and Charles T. Ritt and all the people that probably used to do pretty well when Wall Street was doing well, it's just not a pretty time to be selling dress shirts. Although, to be fair, what we call it at work is the above the keyboard. Above the keyboard is actually doing pretty well. So women's bracelets, makeup, dress shirts actually are doing fine, but suits definitely not, and slacks 1,000% not, because who wants to wear slacks? And jeans is actually an interesting topic. So, some of our hedge funds, in my case, but generally the jeans makers are looking at, forecasting businesses like ours and saying, okay, well, we don't know if kids are going to college. We don't know if people are going to actually physically go to high school. Jeans look good, but they're not necessarily that comfortable. How big is athleisure going to be? Are sweatpants what we need to focus on? So if you're Dick's Sporting Goods, or, whether you're Athleta or whatever, wherever your seat is in the market, do I need to go nuts and come up with 8 different thicknesses of pants and yoga pants because people just want to be comfortable and they're not even commuting anymore? So these are the types of forecasting questions that we get all the time. So if you're a company looking for this type of data, do you know that Ascential exists? You might know if I'm in the data.world catalog. or you might not, or you might just need to Google search your way into the spiral of wherever Google wants to send you.
Yeah, that's actually a good segue, because I think, you talked a little bit about, weather data. Now weather.com is owned by IBM. Obviously, you've talked to or alluded to a few different places where you can find data. Where are the major marketplaces? Like, if you're somebody at a company who's like, man, I am wearing sweatpants. Like, we need to take a more data driven approach here. Like, where are people going for alternative data these days?
I would say, at least from my experience, they're kind of clustered into a few categories. So if you're looking at a very beautiful, I hate to pitch anybody, but like a very elegant tech-oriented solution, you're sort of like, okay, I hear Snowflake has a data marketplace, and they do. Essentially, actually is on Snowflake. Snowflake has very cool technology, and they're a little industry agnostic, so a good place for us to play. If you're looking sort of in a general sense, a place like Snowflake makes sense. Amazon recently launched their data marketplace. We're actually going to be, appearing there soon. Amazon's also another good place that's a little bit industry agnostic, fairly geographically exposed. So Amazon Data Market Catalog probably makes a lot of sense. And then I guess I don't want to lean too heavy on the financial data markets, but each one of these players like Bloomberg, FactSet, S&P, they're all doing it in part because there are specific data linkages back to their foundational data. So if you have Bloomberg terminals, and if you buy Bloomberg data feeds, particularly the market data, like where did Tesla trade today, why not have your alt data linked to the financial data so it's easier to use out of the box? So if you're in the financial data world, you're going to want one of those market catalogs, because at least it's trying to bend into a use case there. So I think the major marketplaces that I would draw people to, at least that are a little agnostic to the industry, probably be Amazon, Snowflake. There's undoubtedly others. There's a lot of boutique data catalogs coming up as well. And then obviously somebody like yourselves, that has, consulting legs. I think that's another area of the market I find really interesting. If you're a McKinsey or a Big Five consulting firm, do you need to layer in and embed your own data catalog, or can you work with somebody like data.world? I don't think everybody should build data catalogs. I don't think everybody should build their own cloud infrastructure. There can be one or two or three winners, but there's no reason that we need to have 100 data catalogs scattered around the internet.
For sure. And somebody got just a quick pitch for a previous episode that we had on build versus buy data catalogs. So there are reasons for building, there are reasons for buying. So if you want to go into that, don't forget that we had that episode a few weeks back. But I got another question talking about, even connected into the conversation we had before on culture and on people. Who are the personas involved in acquiring data? Like, how do I know within my organization, do I have the right people to go find data? Like, who are those people? What are their roles? Who do they work with? Or do I have to go hire a brand new person for that? I'd love your insights on that.
Yeah, no, look, it's a super hot topic. And it's, if you think about it, is information a strategic weapon, or is it more back office? And I think it depends on the organization and who the leadership are. I think with any good leadership organization, you see what the company values. Is the CEO formerly a salesperson? Is the CEO formerly a product person? So without going too far down that analogy, I think usually the roots, they're built at the top and they work their way down. So I would say, in the areas I'm familiar with, like a bank, investment banks, commercial banks are so data driven, yet data usually is a back office feature. But if you think about the world of insurance, commercial banking, really asset management, anything that relies heavily on processing data and using stats, machine learning, whatever, to come up with an answer, data heretofore probably has been back office, but it's starting to move more and more front office, especially if the models are breaking down. If you look at like a FICO score or something where, are you going to lend money to somebody? Do they have good credit? Are they using credit? You need a ton of data to fit those models. They're usually back office, not necessarily front office, but I think you're going to see it move more to front office. So who are the people? I think some asset managers and some, very data-driven organizations that are very tech-focused, they typically have a data strategy team. They have a data procurement team. And I think that's very helpful, because if the strategy team is sitting around thinking, what data sets should we have? That's one feature. And then they work very closely with an ops team, or frankly, a supply chain team that literally goes and gets it, and they beat up suppliers, try to get a little bit of price action, and then it moves over to the tech team to plug in. So I think the more forward-thinking organizations, like a consulting firm or any of these that are very strategic, you're starting to see more and more kind of front office roles. And it's typically somebody that's kind of a creative type. Either they come from a discipline, not necessarily data science or not necessarily tech. They might be a business person, a finance person. I mean, certainly if you're sitting at a pharmacy, or something in pharma, you're definitely thinking about oncology, and you probably have to be very technically oriented to even understand what those questions are. Because if I'm sitting in a pharma company and I'm thinking about what kind of batches are the teams making, what are the chemicals they need, what are the data sets they need to represent which chemicals to buy, you definitely need to know the industry. So I think there's two questions. What product hat do you have on, or where do you sit in the organization? And then are you industry agnostic, or do you have to be an industry expert, or some sort of very technical expert to even know where to get started?
So this is interesting. Like you said, either you need to know the industry very well. I mean, depends on the organization that you are, the type of company you are. But I like that you said that you want to have some creativity. So I can imagine that. Let me even think out of the box. What other data that I may not be thinking about could be very useful to help me get more context inside of here? And maybe because you know the industry, that's one thing that can help. But just have that creativity. Like I got this hunch, maybe like getting this other data would be useful in here. Is that something that you see, like, or people are very data driven to go get the data they need to get?
It's so funny the amount of Socratic method I use with people. Sometimes they already have all the answers and all the questions, and other times they don't know where to start. So I'd say certain sophisticated teams I've worked with at hedge funds, just they think 8 steps ahead, and they're always thinking about, okay, movie theaters. When are the movies going to reopen? Well, let's backtrack. What's the health of the consumer? Are they making movies? When are the movies going to get launched? And they can think from point A to point F, and they know what data sets or what they would need to kind of think through the process. But I have other teams that I try to work with that I ask them questions like, okay, so you tell me you're a macro trader and you're trying to figure out, is the pound going to be stronger next year? The amount of places you might have to look to figure that out are really, really challenging. Because if you think about the dynamics of each country, what are they producing? What are the core products? What do trade deficits look like? What's the regulatory system look like? You could go down that rabbit hole and ask 800 questions, and those 800 questions would lead you to tons of data sets. So I think it's you have to be more creative when there's no end answer, but when there's an easy answer, like, look, Tenet looks like a really cool movie. If it gets released next quarter, and I have some sense for when the vaccines are rolling out for COVID, how popular are the AMCs going to be that are showing the Tenet films? At least it's a linear question. You don't necessarily know the answer, and there's some variables in there, but it's a little bit more closed loop, I guess. The open loop questions just require a ton of creativity. How is the pound going to look in 3 years vis-a-vis the US dollar? The amount of inputs you could have and the features you could tweak are practically infinite, which is why most people look at financial instruments as an inefficient market no matter what. I mean, it can't be efficient because there's so many questions and there really is no answer. And to some extent, the prediction models are good, but they'll never be perfect. Whereas if you're looking at what's the forecast for, crop development next year in Argentina, if I have rainfall and I typically know the patterns and I know how much was planted, you can pretty well forecast with a little bit of fine tuning within some level of precision. So I think, I guess the short answer is some organizations are more creative than others, but some questions are much more complex than others. So it depends a little bit on the complexity of the question and who the players are in the room.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of sort of art to it, not just the science of it. And so it's that makes it interesting because you're not just sort of setting your hypotheses and saying, hey, here's what we could do. It seems like there's a lot of as you mentioned, creativity, there's guessing and testing, there's experience and expertise that kind of comes to play in it. So that's interesting. And one thing that came to mind as you were kind of talking through that, we were talking a little bit and we started from the persona side of it, is that, we keep on hearing this term more often lately, this idea of a data hunter, that these are people in an organization. You had mentioned sort of front office, back office. Do you see that data hunters tend to be more of a back office thing, more of a front office thing? Is that, is it a hat people wear or a role that people have?
It's so funny. I mean, this is like the hottest topic in our industry, and it's one that's it's going to take time to really sort out. So I would say, if you're in a traditional seat as a fund manager, for example, you're going to say data is back office. You're going to say, I already got everything I need from Bloomberg, from talking to research analysts, from talking to the CFOs of these companies. I don't particularly need any extra data. I'm fine. I want to do well in the market. I want to get paid my bonus, and I want to go to sleep and, wake up tomorrow with my 8 kids in my gigantic house and, leave me alone. Data is a back office function.
Yeah.
Now, the problem is, as returns are getting harder to find and data is getting more and more distributed across organizations, the people in the quote unquote back office that used to be the buyer of the Bloomberg data or the buyer of the weather data are sort of saying, look, I'm actually a strategic part of what we call organizational alpha. I'm seeking alpha, which is excess returns. We are seeking it as an organization. And I'm part of the team that's helping immunerate our fund managers with the right answers. I want a piece of that action. I want to move more to the strategy side. I want to get paid like a strategic thinker. So I think that is kind of the evolution of what we're seeing. Am I more front office? Am I more part of the answer? Am I more part of the success quotient? If I am, I want to get paid like that. I want to, be seen by the organization. So I think it's just a matter of time where we're going to see this more and more. Whether you're talking about optimizing an Uber route or DoorDash for food delivery or whatever, the better you feed the machines, it's the guys and gals that are building the machines and the people that are loading the machines with training data. Every one of these pieces is critical. So I think the back office is moving to the middle office, and then the next step would be the front office. It is a very strategic attribute to be able to say, what do I want to tweak in my model? What are the algos trying to answer? Because the algos are getting prettier and prettier. The GT3 or whatever, like the ability to complete a sentence is getting better. But why am I building the sentence, right? Like, how many monkeys on a typewriter could come up with Shakespeare given enough time? Fair enough. But I think it's moving more front office. It's typically considered back office. Data hunter is a beautiful role and a beautiful title in my mind. It's sort of like the like the fishing expedition. What am I fishing for? Am I going to catch anything today?
So I think this is going to be interesting discussion going forward on our whole topic that we've had before on data product management, on knowledge science. I think the question is, where does a data hunter fit within the larger data ecosystem, data teams within an organization? I think there's something worth thinking more about. But hey, Jeremy, I know I told you time flies. It's already almost been 30 minutes. I want to close up with this one question. Final question is, what is the biggest mistake that kind of data acquisition teams have within an organization? And like, what if there's something you're going to tell people is, don't do this. People do this all the time. Do not do this. What is that thing to make sure that they don't make those mistakes that other people have done?
There's a bunch I could say, but I think the most valuable one is knowing the capacity of your team to handle data. And I don't necessarily mean getting the data or cleaning the data. It's using the data. So if you have 50 data scientists and they're all really, really good, and you could feed them 50 unique data sets and a bunch of different questions, then you can go buy that data and watch them come up with the answers. But I think one of the biggest mistakes I see is large teams buying a ton of data because they want to impress management and they want to impress their investors. And frankly, they don't even use half of it. There's been certain subscriptions that come up and I'm like, hey, I see that they're never even using the data. Typically they put it into a data lake and I don't see what happens downstream. But what if they've never asked me any questions? Somebody pays a few $100,000 for a data feed, and I don't really get a lot of questions after integration happens. I can guess they might not even be using it. So I think the biggest mistake a data hunter or a data team can do, particularly on the processing of expensive data, is buy ahead of their real ability to process. I think demand is infinite, whether it's public data, private data, expensive data, alternative data. Demand is infinite, but your supply of really great people to pound on the data and come up with answers, that's usually the limiting factor. It's not always budget. It's really just more, how much do we actually need to process? So be very cautious about buying stuff that people don't have time to process. Know the capabilities of your team, how good they are, how fast they are, how much they can work with in ambiguity, and not waste money on buying a bunch of stuff in advance.
Yeah. So don't treat your data purchase like a gym membership. Just, you have the option to go to the gym if you want to, but actually go to the gym. Make sure you can, right?
Be realistic about how frequently you're going to go to the gym, for sure.
Awesome. Well, hey, Tim, like always, let's wrap up with takeaways. You want to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. So, honestly, there were a few takeaways there that I started to get really excited about, but the one that I think that would really impacted me the most is actually the last thing that you said there, Jeremy, knowing the capacity of your team to use the data, because I think that there usually you have one problem or the other. It's that either like you're not taking advantage of alt data at all, and you're not letting it actually have the impact it could have on your business, or you're overdoing it, right? You're actually buying a ton of different data assets and you're not putting it to effective use. You're kind of wasting your money or just trying to use up your budget. So I love thinking of it as like an optimization problem, and how do you really get good at optimizing that? So that's really interesting to me.
And my takeaway is, I got several takeaways. The first things that come to mind, one, simple definition, a data marketplace is really a data catalog for your internal and external data. That's a kind of one simple definition. And I love this thing of, we got to be creative. You're going to have questions that have no clear answers. You're very complex questions. You really need to have people who are going to be creative to know figure out what type of data is going to be needed, really think out of the box. So I love that this is not just kind of a plain old simple statistical math problem we're going to do. No, we got to be really creative, think out of the box here. I think that's one of the great takeaways I'm getting out of this. Jeremy, thank you so much for your time. This was awesome. I myself have to go back and listen to this because there's just so much information that you just shared with us. I look forward to keep having the conversation going on.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, and keep up with the good work.
Great. Everybody have a great Wednesday.